President Trump has issued a revised immigration order that goes into effect this Thursday. Critics say, though, that it is still discriminatory. Here to break it down for us, we have immigration attorney David Leopold, as well as the Center for Constitutional Rights Executive Director Vince Warren. David, the new order is somewhat different. Is it different enough?
No, it's not. What they did, Ari, was they dropped one of the countries, Iraq. They stopped the complete ban on Syrian refugees, but the contours of it are exactly the same. And as Stephen Miller, the senior policy advisor for the president, pointed out, roughly the policy of banning Muslims is still the same. So really effectively what this is a ban on Muslims. And this defies what's in the immigration law, defies what's in the Constitution. Our country's better than this, Ari.
And you mentioned what is similar, and of course one of the briefs here filed in the new challenges basically cites White House aide Stephen Miller to say, well, even he concedes it's the same.
Right.
Vince Warren, take a listen to Attorney General of Washington State Bob Ferguson, who is maybe a first among equals in the Trump resistance because he won the order blocking the original ban, and he's gone to court arguing that should block the second ban. Here he is.
The bottom line is that two key provisions that we challenged originally, the ban on the now six nations and the refugee ban, those are virtually unchanged. The language is virtually identical. So our view is really, as you mentioned at the outset, that we have a temporary restraining order already in place. The language hasn't changed. Therefore, quite simply, it still applies.
That's a logical argument, but I used to do some law with you. Full disclosure, I know you to be an accurate and careful lawyer. It's also a pretty bold one. I don't expect necessarily the court to block the new ban based on his legal strategy. What do you think?
Well, I think that it is true that those are very similar. They're very similar facts with respect to those two arguments, but there are some changes that I think the courts would just have to take into consideration.
To acknowledge.
Yeah. I will say, though, it's an interesting question because I think there are two changes that actually undermine the government's original arguments, essentially make their justifications less strong. I mean, one of them is even removing Iraq. It's the idea that if you have 7 countries that they're telling you when they're pushing this ban through, these are the most dangerous countries in the world, and they say, oh, well, one of them's not so dangerous now, it actually undercuts their original plan.
Because it feels a little arbitrary.
Well, it certainly is arbitrary. I mean, and it's completely political. I think that's what, the record is showing. It has nothing to do with safety.
What do you mean by political in that context?
What I mean by that is that there was such pushback from veterans, from people in Iraq, from everyone who was talking about how there were men that were in Iraq and women in Iraq who were working with the American government in that context who want to come here to the United States. And it was a political disaster for the Trump administration. And the other thing that I would say is that even the idea of allowing visa holders, as of the time that the executive order goes into effect, allowing them to come into the country, while that's a very good thing, it does undercut their argument that there was such terrible vetting prior to the Trump administration coming in. It essentially concedes that the vetting isn't really that bad.
David, I've spoken to a lot of lawyers who are critical of this ban this week, but they concede that the administration has bolstered its legal case. It has certainly knocked out potential plaintiffs in addressing green cards. It has removed some of the objectionable language on religion that had made it really vulnerable. The idea of, wait, is this a preference for Christians? Well, they've drawn that back. And that leaves, as you know, a larger argument over intent. Not just what the thing says, but where it comes from. How do lawyers, in your view, draw a line from the president's statements during the campaign, which very explicitly said he wanted to discriminate based on religion, and what the Trump White House argument is now, which is, hey, we're allowed to change our minds. We're not the first politician that said certain stuff on the campaign trail and changed tune, and give us credit for that.
Well, Ari, take a look at the text of the statute. I mean, they're basing their case on what we call INA Section 212F, which ostensibly gives the executive, the president, the authority to suspend the entry of certain aliens. That's the term used in the statute, certain non-citizens. But if you read it, Ari, the way that the administration is arguing it should be read, then what it does is it completely eviscerates the rest of the law. And our law is very clear about how we should be excluding people who are terror threats. And that law has been in place, and it's been put in place by Congress. So essentially, the president's reading of the law, if followed, would allow the president to pretty much change the immigration law at his will, which is clearly not the intent
Right, which is
of the Congress.
a big reach. David, Leopold, we're out of time. Vince Warren, thank you.